Penance, penance, penance. Dear brothers and sisters, in 1980, Fulda, Germany, interview for the German magazine Stimme des Glaubens, published in October 1981, John Paul II was asked explicitly to speak about the third secret. He said, "Because of the seriousness of its contents, in order not to encourage the worldwide power of communism to carry out certain course, my predecessors in the chair of Peter have diplomatically preferred to withhold its publication. On the other hand, it should be sufficient for all Christians to know this much. If there is a message in which it is said that the oceans will flood entire sections of the earth, that from one moment to the other, millions of people will perish, there is no longer any point in really wanting to publish this secret message. Many want to know merely out of curiosity or because of their taste for sensationalism, but they forget that to know implies for them a responsibility. It is dangerous to want to satisfy one's curiosity only if one is convinced that we can do nothing against a catastrophe that has been predicted." Quote end. He held up his rosary and stated, "Here is the remedy against this evil. Pray, pray, and ask for nothing else. Put everything in the hands of the Mother of God." Quote end. Asked what would happen in the church, he said, "We must be prepared to undergo great trials in the not too distant future, trials that will require us to be ready to give up even our lives and the total gift of self to Christ and for Christ. Through your prayers and mine, it is possible to alleviate this tribulation, but it is no longer possible to avert it, because it is only in this way that the church can be effectively renewed. How many times indeed has the renewal of the church been effected in blood? This time again, it will not be otherwise. We must be strong. We must prepare ourselves. We must entrust ourselves to Christ and to His Holy Mother, and we must be attentive, very attentive, to the prayer of the Rosary. Lucia herself is reported to have explicitly stated that the third secret contains apocalyptic content. According to one source, when Lucia was asked about the third secret, she said it was in the Gospels and in the Apocalypse, and at one point she had even specified Apocalypse chapter 8 to 13, a range that included Apocalypse 12 verse 4, the chapter and verse cited by Pope John Paul II in his homily in Fatima on 13 May 2000. The Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to 3 shepherd children at Fatima, Portugal, 6 times only on the 13th day of 6 consecutive months in 1917. Beginning on May 13, the 3 children were Lucia Santos and her cousins Jacinta and Francisco Marto. The 3 Secret of Fatima consist of a series of apocalyptic visions and prophecies have been given to 3 young Portuguese shepherds. Our Lady gave message of warning. I said about it in the another my exposure to you. But now, as appendix, I would like to express some new visions. Our Lady, she told children that God had chosen to use Russia as the instrument of chastisement to punish the world if people do not change. If people repent, they will obtain conversion of Russia to the Catholic faith. She promises, if my requests are granted, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. But she also warned us, if my requests are not granted, Russia will spread her errors throughout the world, raising up wars and persecutions against the Church. The good will be martyred, the Holy Father will have much to suffer, various nations will be annihilated. And so on. See Marian apparitions of the 20th century, a message of urgency. And now I would like to quote Cardinal Archbishop Vigano on the Fourth Secret of Fatima. Father Gruner vindicated. Article also written by Christopher Ferrara. But the words by Archbishop Vigano. With each passing day, the pontificate of the man from Argentina becomes an increasingly bizarre exhibition of a dysfunctional Church of Vatican II. With Francis now declaring in all seriousness that the Wuhan virus epidemic is nature, throwing a tantrum so that we take care of her. This is a pontificate in which we see the Pope on Easter Sunday publishing a letter filled with leftist cant in which there is not the slightest mention of Christ. It is more and more evident that the unparalleled situation in which the Church now finds itself must have been foreseen by the Blessed Virgin in the portion of the Fourth Secret of Fatima we have yet to see, that being the Virgin's own explanation of the post-apocalyptic vision published by the Vatican on June 26, 2000, along with the ludicrous interpretation by the corrupt Cardinal Sodano that only made it more apparent that something is missing. According to Sodano, the vision of the future Pope being executed by a band of soldiers outside a devastated city filled with the dead means John Paul II not being killed by a lone assassin in the intact city of Rome in 1981. The full text has not been released. The Fourth Secret of Fatima. And now Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, whose just criticisms of the current occupant of the chair of Peter are known to the whole world, has given voice to what millions of the faithful believe. I believe. And what Father Nicholas Gruner, another witness of faith of today, was among the first to proclaim to widespread scorn by the enlightened ones in the Catholic commentariat. In an interview with the Portuguese Catholic journal Diezire, Day of Rome, the Archbishop declares that the Vatican has suppressed that part of the secret which foretells apostasy in the Church under the governance of those who have laid waste to the vineyard in the name of the Second Vatican Council. Inside the Vatican has provided a translation of this historic interview in which the Archbishop puts the matter just as clearly as Father Gruner did. The third part of the message that Our Lady entrusted to the shepherd children of Fatima so that they could deliver it to the Holy Father remains secret to this day. Our Lady asked for it to be revealed in 1960, but John XXIII had a communique published on February 8 on that year in which he stated that the Church does not wish to take on the responsibility of guaranteeing the truthfulness of the words that the three shepherds' children said the Virgin Mary spoke to them. With this disgusting of the Vatican from the message of the Queen of Heaven, a cover-up operation was started, evidently because the content of the message would have revealed the terrible conspiracy against the Church of Christ but by its enemies. Taking aim at the ridiculous Sodano interpretation, Archbishop Vigano echoes what Father Gruner said the moment the cover-up operation began, and while it was being carried forward by Sodano's successor, Cardinal Bertone. Note that interesting details about the another Marian apparition. In 2000, during the pontificate of John Paul II, Cardinal Sodano presented as the third secret a version of his own that in several elements appeared clearly incomplete. It is not surprising that the new Secretary of State, Cardinal Bertone, sought to draw attention away to an event in the past and the assassination attempt of John Paul on May 13, 1981, to cause the people of God to believe that the words of the Virgin in 1917, when she appeared, had nothing to do with the crisis of the Church in the decades after 1960. At the marriage of the modernists and Freemasonry that was contracted behind the scenes at the Second Vatican Council, Antonio Socci, who has carefully investigated the third secret, unmasked this harmful behavior on the part of Cardinal Bertone. In addition, it was Bertone himself who heavily discredited and censored the Madonnina de Lacrime, Madonna of Tears of Civitavecchia, whose message perfectly agrees with what she said at Fatima. Taking aim at ecumenism, the very core of the Church of Vatican II, the Archbishop launches this searing accusation in the context of the radical decomposition of the mainline Protestant sects, but it is clear that the ecumenical pretext, that is, drawing closer to dissident communities by acquiring even the most recent errors, is based on Satan's hatred for the priesthood and would inevitably lead the Church of Christ to ruin. Quote ends. With this pontificate, says the Archbishop, then, we are witnessing an attack on ecclesiastical celibacy, the attempt to introduce a form of ordained female ministry, and in general an approach to the church dogmas that has adopted to so-called situation theology, whose theological pillars are accidental facts or subjects, the world, nature, the female figure, young people. This theology does not have God's immutable and eternal truth as it is founding center. On the contrary, it starts from the observation of whatever is the current pressing need of these phenomena in order to give answers that are consistent with the expectations of the contemporary world. In short, a church that changes according to the times, as to which the Archbishop says, a church that presents herself as new with respect to the Church of Christ is simply not the Church of Christ. It seems that also the post-conciliar Church, modernist and Masonic, aspires to transform, to overcome the Church of Christ, replacing it with a new church, a deformed and monstrous creature that does not come from God. Quote end. A deformed and monstrous creature that does not come from God. The harshest possible description of the outcome of the post-Vatican II crisis in the Church. But have we not reached the point where the assessment is undeniable? Surely no reasonable observer could deny that the great popes of the pre-conciliar epoch would look upon the current state of the Church and its current earthly head with terrified incomprehension. What Father Gruner first proclaimed 20 years ago should be regarded as self-evident. The truth will surface even in the midst of the worst crisis in church history, especially when the source of that truth is Mother of God herself. What to read more, what to hear more, latest Fatima perspective. Christopher Ferrara, another witness of faith, Juris Doctor degrees from Fordham University. He is president and chief counsel of the American Catholic Lawyers Association. His articles have appeared in the Latin Mass and the Remnants and other publications. He authored several books, including Liberty, The God That Failed, The Secret Still Hidden, False Friends of Fatima, and translated into English Antonio Socci's books. As I said, Il Quarto Secreto di Fatima. My latest text essay to you was titled also Il Quarto Secreto di Fatima, The Fourth Secret of Fatima. He, together with John Salsa, Christopher Ferrara, debates Giuseppe De Carli at conference in Rome. The conference in Rome at the Fatima Challenge, May 2010. The results of that historic debate are detailed in Mr. Ferrara's account Vindication. It changed the landscape of the Fatima controversies forever. And so on. And another witness of faith of today, very interesting. His name Martin Malachi. Malachi Brendan Martin, 1921 to 1999, also known under the pseudonym of Michael Seraphim, was an Irish-born American traditionalist Catholic priest, biblical archaeologist, as exorcist, paleographer, professor, and prolific writer on the Roman Catholic Church. Ordained as a Jesuit priest, Martin became professor of paleography at the Pontifical Biblical Institute in Rome. From 1958, he served as secretary to Cardinal Augustin Bea during preparations for the Second Vatican Council. Disillusioned by Vatican II, Martin asked to be released from certain aspects of his Jesuit vows in 1964 and moved to New York City. Martin's 17 novels and no-fiction books were frequently critical of the Catholic hierarchy, who he believed had failed to act on what he called the third prophecy revealed by the Virgin Mary at Fatima. His works included the scribal character of the Dead Sea Scrolls and Hosted to the Devil, which dealt with Satanism, demonic possession, and exorcism. The Final Conclave, book of 1978, was a warning against Soviet espionage in the Vatican. In 1964, Martin requested a release from his vows and from the Jesuit order, as I said. He received a provisional release in May 1965 and a dispensation from his vows of poverty and obedience on 30 June 1965. Even if dispensed from his religious vow of chastity, Martin remained under the obligation of chastity if still an ordained secular priest. Martin maintained that he remained a priest, saying that he had received a dispensation from Paul VI to that effect. Martin moved to New York City in 1966, working as a dishwasher, waiter, a taxi driver while continuing to write. He co-founded an antiques firm and was active in communications and media for the rest of his life. Martin published several works of fiction and non-fiction in the following years: Final Conclave, King of Kings, a novel of the life of David, a novel. His other works included The Pilgrim, The Encounter, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Church, The New Castle, Reaching for the Ultimate, 1982, this book. Rich Church, Poor Church, The Catholic Church and Its Money, 1984. There is Still Love, 5 Parables of God's Love That Will Change Your Life, 1984. Martin's best-selling 1987 non-fiction book, The Jesuits, The Society of Jesus and the Betrayal of the Roman Catholic Church, was highly critical of the Jesuit order, accusing the Jesuits of systematically undermining church teaching. Later life, Martin was a periodic guest on Art Bell radio program, Coast to Coast AM, between 1996 and 1998. The show continues to play tapes of his interviews on Halloween, and so on. Very interesting text, according to this priest. The Vatican restored Martin's faculty to celebrate Mass in 1989 at his request. He was strongly supported by some traditionalist Catholic sources and severely criticized by other sources, such as a National Catholic Reporter. Martin served as a guest commentator for CNN during the live coverage of the visit of Pope John Paul II to the United States in October 1995. In the last 3 years of his life, Martin forged a close friendship with the traditionalist Catholic philosopher Rama Kumaraswamy. During this period, Martin was received in a private audience by John Paul II. In 1999, Malachi Martin died in Manhattan on an intracerebral hemorrhage 4 days after his 78th birthday. It was caused by a fall in his apartment in Manhattan. The documentary Hostage to the Devil claimed that Martin said he was pushed from a stool by a demonic force. Martin's funeral took place in a St. Anthony of Padua Roman Catholic Chapel of West Orange, New Jersey, before the burial at Gate of Heaven Cemetery in Hawthorne, New York. Very interesting priest. We may read, according to the chastisement and the fire, In the Bible, prophecy of St. Peter, world will be chastised by fire. Second letter Peter, chapter 3. Knowing this first, that in the last days there shall come deceitful scoffers, walking after their own lust, saying, where is his promise or his coming? For since the time that the Father slept, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. For this they are willfully ignorant of, that the heavens were before, and the earth out of water and through water, consisting by the word of God, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. But the heavens and the earth which are now, by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of the ungodly man. But of this one thing be not ignorant, by my beloved, that one day with the Lord is in 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. The Lord delays not his promise, as some imagine, but deals patiently for your sake, not willing that any should perish, but that all should return to penance. But the day of the Lord shall come as the thief, in which the heavens shall pass away with great violence, and the elements shall be melted with heat, and the earth and the works which are in it shall be burned up. Seeing then that all these things are to be dissolved, what manner of people ought you to be in holy conversation and godliness, looking for and hastening unto the coming of the day of the Lord, by which the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with the burning heat. Quote end of Bible. Martin was criticized in the book Clerical Error, a true story by Robert Blair Kaiser, Time Magazine's former Vatican correspondent. Kaiser, a former Jesuit, accused Martin of having carried on an extramarital affair with his wife during 1964 in Rome, and claimed that Martin fled to the United States as a renegade from the priesthood. A friend of Martin's, William Kennedy, published an article in the Seattle Catholic disputing Kaiser's allegation and other claims made about Martin after his death. Kennedy points out that Kaiser admits in his book that he was diagnosed as having paranoid schizophrenia, and cites passages from Kaiser's book which he believes show that Kaiser was writing from a distorted and delusional perspective due to his mental illness. In her 2008 book, Queen of the Oil Club, the intrepid Wanda Jabloński and the Power of Information, Anno Rubino, wrote that Martin Malachi had a love affair with journalist Wanda Jabloński on a visit to Beirut, Lebanon in 1950. The book was published long after the death of both Jabloński and Martin. Etc. Claims that Martin Malachi featured as a curial Monsignor in full regalia of a prominent photograph next to John Paul I, and his assistant Diego Lorenzi appeared on the internet. The photograph published in God's name an investigation into the murder of Pope John Paul I, as shows a Monsignor Martin visibly different from Malachi Martin. This is a case of mistaken identity. The cleric in the photograph was Jacques-Paul Martin, prefect of the Casa Pontificia from 1969 to 1986. And now very important words according to the Fourth Secret of Fatima. Complete translation of original text, Vatican City, June 26, 2000. Given below is a complete translation of the original Portuguese text of the third part of the Secret of Fatima revealed to the three shepherd children at Covadairia Fatima on July 13, 1917, and committed to paper by Sister Lucia on January 3rd, 1944. I write in obedience to you, my God, who command me to do so through His Excellency the Bishop of Leiria and through your most holy Mother and mine. After the two parts which I have already explained, at the left of Our Lady and a little above, we saw an angel with a flaming sword in his left hand. Flashing, it gave out flames that looked as though they would set the world on fire. But they died out in contact with the splendor that Our Lady radiated towards him from her right hand. Pointing to the earth with his right hand, the angel cried out in a loud voice, "Penance, penance, penance." And we saw in an immense light that is God, something similar to how people appear in a mirror when they pass in front of its a bishop dressed in white. We had the impression that it was the Holy Father. Other bishops, priests, men and women religious going up a steep mountain, at the top of which there was a big cross of rough-hewn trunks as of cork tree with the bark. Before reaching there, the Holy Father passed through a big city half in ruins, and half trembling with halting step, afflicted with pain and sorrow, he prayed for the souls of the corpses he met on his way. Having reached the top of the mountain, on his knees at the foot of the big cross, he was killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him. And in the same way there died one after another the other bishops, priests, men and women religious, and various lay people of different ranks and positions. Beneath the two arms of the cross there were two angels each with a crystal aspersorium in his hand, in which they gathered up the blood of the martyrs, and with it sprinkled the souls that were making their way to God. Quote ends. And other very interesting text according to the third Secret of Fatima. You imagine the Polish Sejm yesterday adopted a resolution of defending the good name of St. John Paul II. The left party was against. Can authorities defend themselves? Whatever. The Church apologizes in history for specific difficult moments due to new generations and people's opinions. The Church is purified, whitened. Church always carries a system of values favorable to men, I believe. That is why I never wanted to hit the person of John Paul II if I explain the tense matter of the Third Secret of Fatima and the negative trends in the Church of Christ. Terrible warning, the message of Our Lady of Akita, also Japan. The third message of October 13, 1973, the actual anniversary of the final visions and miracle of Fatima is as follows. As I told you, to the Reverend woman at Akita, very important text according to the Agnes Katsuko Sasagawa, apparitions to Agnes Katsugo Sasagawa at Akita. As I told you, if men do not repent and better themselves, the Father will inflict a terrible punishment on all humanity. The Holy Mary, Mother of God, said to this woman, "It will be a punishment greater than the deluge, such as one will never have seen before. Fire will fall from the sky and will wipe out a great part of humanity, the good as well as the bad, sparing neither priest nor faithful. The survivors will find themselves so desolate that they will envy the dead. The only alms which will remain for you will be the rosary for the sign left by my son. Each day recite the prayers of the rosary. With the rosary, pray for the Pope, the bishops and the priests. The work of the devil will infiltrate even into the church in such a way that one will see cardinals opposing cardinals and bishops against other bishops. The priests who venerate me, will be scorned and opposed by the confreres. The church and altars will be vandalized. The church will be full of those who accept compromises, and the demon will press many priests and consecrated souls to leave the service of the Lord." And so on. Beautiful apparition of the Holy Mary also at the beginning of the 21st century in Medjugorje. There is the book narrated by Ricardo Montalban, Worldwide Reports of Apparitions of Jesus and Mary are Surfacing. Discover in this award-winning documentary some of the most fascinating apparitions of the 20th century and the urgency of the message heaven is giving to the world. If men only knew what eternity is, they would do everything in their power to change their lives. Fatima, Portugal, deeply rooted in humanity's history, the Blessed Virgin Mary has been making repeated visitations throughout the world, particularly in the latter part of the 20th century, to warn us that we are on the brink of destruction unless we heed her messages for repentance, prayer, conversion, fasting, and reconciliation. Is humanity on the verge of self-destruction? Can the world be delivered from the fear engulfing it today? Fatima, Portugal, Boring, Bani, Belgium, Garabandal, Spain, Zaiten, Egypt, Akita, Japan, Medjugorje, Betania, Venezuela, Kibeho, Rwanda, Naju, South Korea, Ukraine, and more. And we may pray always. My beloved Christian sisters and brothers, after 1960, the whole world paid attention to Poland, especially after the election of Cardinal Wojtyla as Pope during the Polish conclave in October 1978. I believe that the humble Mary, the servant of the Lord, is adored here in an extraordinary way in Poland. And then in the 60s and 70s of the last century, during my childhood, she made a visible pilgrimage in the Częstochowa icon all over my country. Father Malachi, in the book titled "The Kiss of This Blood," wrote that John 23 disregarded the Fourth Secret of Fatima and did not announce it to the Fathers of the Vatican Council II. In 1981, John Paul II was shot, and later he did not fully express the whole message, the meaning of this mystery, of this secret, Fourth Secret. During his pontificate, John Paul II only eluded the Fourth Secret of Fatima, although he knew it before 1980. In 2000, Cardinal Sodano announced the fulfillment of this mystery, as I said, in this era. Thus, the Fourth Secret of Fatima, which also had a great impact on my life and goes with me through the recent history of humanity, so raised and worshipped in the second half of the last century, was unconsciously silenced. And the Fourth Secret of Fatima, according to me, a modest priest from Poland, Polish Republic, has not yet been fully fulfilled. Every next pope and his flock in the Church of Christ will face the wall of persecution in every era of human history. Mountains of human emotions will pile up, rise above the world until the end of his mission. The Fourth Secret of Fatima thus remains as a momentum, a warning for the often sanguine Universal Church of St. Peter Catholic Church in Rome to fulfill the mission of Jesus Christ as faithfully as possible, not to leave the last lamb out of the flock. As a priest, I am often misunderstood, and as a priest, I never wanted to remain outside this flock. It is with burning concern that I tell you about the message of Fatima, because the Church should constantly watch over faithfulness to God and His Mother in every era until the end. I pray for you, and I would like to be with you always.